So, I mean, guys, even if you are a skeptical person, I mean, you cannot look at all this evidence and not see the connection. King Hezekiah, God is my strength. The person who relied on God as his strength, and God was the only reason he had strength left, the only reason he was still alive and given 15 more years, because a judgment should have come upon him 15 years ago. So God pointing back to something from 15 years ago, December 26, 2004, a water judgment coming against Hezekiah, a flood of trouble. See, a flood of trouble coming against Hezekiah and his nation 15 years later. The mercy of God ending after 15 years, pointing again to this year, December 26, 2019. And the sign was a sign in the sun, about the shadow of the sun. An annular solar eclipse makes a shadow on the sun. Okay, we see the shadow here on the earth. It's part of the sun is blocked out in the shape of a wedding ring. And we talked about how Hezekiah said in verse 19, 2 Kings 20:19, he talked about how is it not good for peace and security to occur in my days? A covenant of peace and security. What is a wedding ring? It's a covenant. Represents a bond. Okay, I mean, they show this stuff to us all the time. The new James Bond movie is scheduled to come out. It's being called, it's got a title to the movie, but it's being called Bond 25, pointing to Christmas. This is pointing to a covenant, I believe, that is going to take place on Christmas. I'll take you back to 2012, because we've been talking about how this is a 9/11 event that's coming up, right? A second 9/11. Okay, well, if we go back to 2012, Obama signed, watch this, the United States-Israel Enhanced Security Act. So it was to strengthen the security with Israel. Well, Daniel 9:27 says, and he shall confirm the covenant with many for 1 week. The word confirm there means to strengthen. To strengthen. And Obama signed the covenant with Israel on July 27th, 2012. That was on or just a couple days before the 9th of Av, the 9/11. Just a couple days before the 9/11 event, or on the day of the 9/11 event. He strengthened the Assyrian that God has been protecting Hezekiah and the people from, protecting America from, will return at the end of the 15 years with his peace and security covenant to strengthen. Remember, Hezekiah means God is my strength, meaning this king and his people depended on God as their strength. But they're going to turn to this man, the Assyrian, he's going to strengthen them with his covenant, peace and security, taking the place of God. They're going to turn to him as their God. We know that Israel is going to make a covenant with death, with the Antichrist. There it is right there. I just showed it to you. Peace and security in my days, in those 15 years. And as I said, Barack Obama signed the United States-Israel Enhanced Security Act. Well, guess what? The day he did this, right? Now, mind you, Obama always wore a blue or black suit. He pretty much always wore that, as all the presidents really do. The day he did this, what stood out and got noticed by some people, but, you know, a lot of people just paid attention to the covenant itself. The day he did this, Obama wore this weird, ugly-looking green suit with a red tie. Now, there were people who pointed out that they felt like that was a direct shot at Israel because he wore the colors of Palestine, the green and red, the colors of Palestine, showing that even though I've signed this covenant with you, I'm not in favor of you, I'm in favor of Palestine. Guess what the Lord spoke to me and showed to me? He wore a green suit, and with a red tie. Green and red, folks. It's Christmas. That's Christmas colors. Pointing to him coming with a covenant on or near Christmas. And again, an annular solar eclipse makes a ring in the sky, a covenant. I'm going to go out on a limb here and tell you, and again, this is not a thus saith the Lord. This is just me telling you, making a prediction, basically, not a prophecy, but a prediction, that Obama sometime next week is going to show up with a covenant. He's going to make his covenant sometime next week. And see, this brings us full circle back to what I said about Obama being the man that appears in Daniel 10:4. Okay, on the 24th day of the first month, it talks about the man that Daniel saw, and the man had the face as the appearance of lightning, which is Barak. Okay, and his eyes were as of flames of fire. The flames of fire, his eyes as flames of fire, I told you, that's him having his eyes on Hanukkah. Hanukkah is the prize. His eyes are on Hanukkah. Remember, when did Jesus make the greatest revelation of himself? Basically, directly answering the Jews. He had answered them before, but they heard what they wanted to hear because they had no spiritual ears. But they asked him plainly, tell us, basically, are you, God? Are you the Son of God? And Jesus told them plainly on Hanukkah in John 10, he says, I and my Father are one. So he makes it official to them of who he is, of getting rid of all suspicions, and of course they hated him for it because they felt he was lying and blaspheming, but he officially made himself known to them on Hanukkah. I'm submitting to you, I don't think Obama can pass this up. In his arrogance and wanting to usurp the throne of Jesus, I'm willing to bet anything that he shows up this coming week, because Hanukkah begins in Israel Sunday evening. I'll bet anything he shows up to try and replace Christ during Hanukkah. I guarantee it. He's going to show up sometime this coming week during Hanukkah, around Christmas, maybe even on Christmas Day. I guarantee it. He will not miss the opportunity to do it. That's why on March 22nd, 2013, in the middle of the 7 years, in the midst of the week, he was at the Church of the Nativity. The only time of year where you talk about nativity scenes is Christmas. That's where he was in the midst of the week, the midst of the 7-year covenant with many. Well, guess what the middle day of the week is? The middle day of our week. I know a lot of people like to consider Monday the first day because that's when you go back to work, but the first day of the week is Sunday. Now, God doesn't call it Sunday, but Sunday is God's first day of his week as he established the week to be. So the middle day, as we call hump day, is Wednesday. That's day 4. Wednesday is the middle. It's the midst of the week. Christmas is on Wednesday, the midst of the week. You think it's a coincidence that Obama was in the Church of the Nativity in the midst of the 7 years, the midst of the week. And now here we are arriving at Christmas, which falls in the midst of a literal week of 7 days. This is not coincidence. As I said, even if you're the world's biggest skeptic, you cannot deny all this evidence. I guarantee you he's going to show up with his covenant sometime in the next upcoming days. He won't miss the opportunity. In Daniel 10, it says his eyes were as lamps of fire because he's got his eyes on Hanukkah. You ready for a confirmation from Satan himself? Go to iPad Goat. Watch the end of the iPad Goat video when the Antichrist character is on that Egyptian boat riding down in the water. He's riding and you see the lotus flowers pop up and he awakens. All right. So he awakens from his death, his apparent death. And as I told you earlier in the iPad Goat, when Obama's sitting in the classroom, when the apple rolls to him and opens up, you see the flower petals in the middle of the flower, the part called the stamen. There are 12 sections, and it makes on the petals around the outside make 25 sections. So you have 12, 25, Christmas Day. But fast forward later in iPad Goat, when he awakens and he's riding on that solar boat, the boat that carries them through the land of death. All right, and I talked about him receiving a head wound. Watch, when he opens his eyes and you see the church crumbling behind him, representing the destruction of the church. And I know that had to do with the Notre Dame Cathedral falling, but it also symbolized that he's going to destroy the church. But when he opens his eyes are on fire. He's got lamps of fire in his eyes, burning in his eyes, clearly pointing to Daniel chapter 10. And as I told you, Revelation chapter 1. Because Jesus stands in the midst of the lampstands, the midst of the 7 churches, and his eyes are as a flame of fire because he is the fire of the churches. There's no fire without him. But this is a man who wants to usurp the throne of Jesus, so he has his eyes on the lampstands. His eyes are on Hanukkah and the churches to take the place of Christ during Hanukkah so that they will turn to him as their strength. Not God is my strength anymore. That they will make Obama their strength. in his mind, replacing God. That's why he went in the church of the Nativity where Christ was born and stood there. When you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation standing in the holy place where he should not be. He was making a statement on March 22nd, 2013. I am replacing you. They will turn to me now, not to Jesus as their savior. That's what he was saying in the church of the Nativity, Christmas. Making a statement that they will turn to him for their strength, their security and safety in the 15-year period. A covenant with death instead of turning to God as they always have. Israel is about to make that covenant very soon. I guarantee it. And that's why the sun going back 10 degrees, go back 10 years to this same time of year, December 2009. And that's when he showed up and accepted his Nobel Peace Prize. And in his statement accepting the award, he said, I realized the considerable controversy around me receiving this award. And he even had a sly grin on his face because he knew what he was saying. Remember, a man who understands dark sentences, as it describes the Antichrist. But he said the controversy is because I'm at the beginning and not the end of my labors on the world stage. That's commencement. As I showed you in the other video, commencement. Commencement is the end of one phase of something and the beginning of another phase. Commencement. Annuit coeptis. They're telling you that this 2019 Hanukkah Christmas season is the capstone being put on the pyramid. The all-seeing eye is complete. Satan's temple is ready for him to inhabit. It's the commencement. He said, I am at the beginning and not the end of my labors on the world stage. You ready? Because he was telling you that we're in 2009 in December on the 24th of the 9th month. It was just a preview of what would happen. He was telling you that when it comes full circle back around 10 years later, that sundial thing with Hezekiah, when it comes back around 10 years later is when he will show up to complete his role of trying to usurp the throne of Christ. And he will provide the peace and security that Hezekiah and the kingdom had always turned to God for. They will not turn to God. They will turn to Barack Obama. That's what he was saying. After 10 years, in December of 2019, he will show up again and earn the Nobel Peace Prize that they offered to him. That's why it was a covenant. For those of you who like to say the Nobel Peace Prize couldn't have been a covenant, that was an award. No, it wasn't. It's an award to everyone else it was given to because it was given to everyone else that received it over the years for something they had already accomplished. Obama even acknowledged in his speech that he was being given the award for something that he will do later on. He had not done anything to accomplish to deserve that award. He was being given an award for something he will do. You know what that is? That's a covenant. When you make a deal with someone, I'm going to give you this, and in return, you will do this. That's a covenant, folks. That's not an award. That's a covenant. The Nobel Peace Prize was a covenant. To prove those of you who try to say it wasn't, wrong. You are wrong. It was a covenant because it was something given to him for what he's going to do later. When we make an agreement that I'm going to give you something in return for you to do something later, that is a covenant. That's why God is showing the sign of a covenant, a ring in the sky, on December 26th, coming up next week. And here's a little something as I leave you the end of this video, and we'll go into more stuff because there's a lot more to reveal. For the Jews, the way it works when it comes to them for marriage is that a woman is only supposed to be remarried if her first husband dies. Watch this. And this is why Jesus died, so that eventually Israel can be remarried to them. Are you ready for this? God is showing a sign of a ring, offering Israel a ring in the sky, saying to them, the husband you have taken on, this false husband you've replaced me with, Barack Obama, is about to die. The head wound. See, so Satan perpetuating him this head wound to fool and deceive everybody, he doesn't realize that by the Antichrist dying, that will pave the way for Israel to marry Jesus again next year. God will get his bride back at the end of next year. God always wins.